Hey guys, so I have actually just finished getting caught up with the Penguin, and it's still really good. Like, it's still just a phenomenal TV show, and if you'd seen my last video on it, you know it's pretty much like the perfect representation of what I really want from comic books. It is taking this large-scale interpretation of Batman and Gotham and really zooming in on the small people and telling this really cool, intimate story. And honestly, I was really thinking I was going to be making a video about how the Penguin handles exposition and backstory, because I do think it does a really good job of that. Like, it does so many things well. But I wrote up basically like an entire script, and I was going to sit down today and I was going to record that. But when you're a content creator, you basically have this little like nag in the back of your head, and it tells you to wait sometimes. And not that I can't do that script, because I probably will in the future, but I think I actually wanted to talk about something differently. And it revolves around how the Penguin tackles gender. And that might be like a crazy thing to hear, because gender is so low on the list of things that you would think the Penguin makes a commentary on. But as someone who's studied the social sciences, someone whose background is in psychology, and someone who has made videos on this channel about gender representations in storytelling, in Hollywood and popular fictions, it was something that I noticed and something that I did want to comment on, because I appreciate what's happening in the show. And I think when I point some things out, other people might appreciate them too, because things are going on and topics are being handled in ways that I think everybody is asking for, but nobody is realizing that they're getting. A lot of what I have to comment on is about the two main characters, so Oz and Sophia. And it's the representation of how their gender is brought to the screen and how it affects their character. Obviously, I have much more of a connection and an understanding of Oz, because I'm a dude myself, he's a dude, and I'm going to talk about that. And the main thing I'm actually going to address for both of the characters is how femininity interacts with and affects the gender expression in the show. And I promise, stick with me, this is going to get a lot less crazy than you think it is, right? So obviously, Oz is our main character, but he's not like a great guy. I think there are moments when he is close to being, I don't know if redeemed is the right word, but he's very likable, right? He's very charismatic, he's very silver-tongued. And then there are moments, obviously, when he's interacting with Victor or Sophia or other characters, where you just get a sense that, like, wow, this guy is really terrible. And again, I think that's really cool. I think when a show or any fiction is about a villain, allowing them to be unlikable, allowing them to be a villain, to have these multifaceted great features, is a huge part of making it successful, right? We don't need every single villain to be Maleficent-ized or Cruella-ized. We can just have villains be main characters and also have them be villains. But a huge part of Oz as a character and his whole motivation for wanting power is actually affected by gender. And it's in his relationship with his mom. And this is why I mean, like, femininity affects Oz's masculinity. Even if you go back and watch The Batman, Oz is brought to extreme fits of anger, to the point of horribly irresponsible and self-destructive actions, because of a lack of self-esteem and a lack of him feeling like he's worthy of what he is supposed to be. And initially, all of that, when you watch the show, isn't tied to gender. And again, when you go watch The Batman, like, people forget, like, Oz was the one who got so angry that he pulled a gun on Falcone in the Batman movie. And obviously in the first scene of the show, Oz is so angry at Alberto that he shoots him. And you would possibly think, oh, he just maybe has an anger issue, which obviously I still think he does. But we get a true insight and a true key to Oz's issues the more we get to know his mother and the way his mother talks to him and what his mother expects from him. There's actually two big moments. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have clips for them. If my editor can find them for me, that'd be great, Charlie. But I don't know if you're going to be able to find them because the episodes just came out. But one of the moments, Oz is explaining to his mom what has happened with the Falcones. When he is saying, we need to go, we need to run, she calls him a pussy boy. And she says, he needs to take what is his and run the town. That piqued my interest because I think that's in like episode 2 or something, maybe episode 1. But she like admonished him and really attacked his masculinity over his fear of dying at the mob. She basically was telling him it was his time to take them out of poverty and to deliver to the family, to his family, what he had been destined to get for their entire lives. And then in episode 5, there's a moment when, you know, he has more or less failed and he's consoling his mom after his failure. And she turns to him and she says, "What kind of son can't even protect his own mother?" And she shoves him off of her. He's trying to embrace her and his own mother doesn't want that. And it's these two moments that I think give a perfect insight into everything else that's happening with Oz. The reason Oz feels so inadequate and the reason that he feels like he needs to do these things, this drive for power, to be recognized, to not be mocked, the reason he's doing all this is because of his mom. And it's because his mom, probably for 30, 40, 50 years, has made him feel like he's less of a man. That because of his station in life, because of him not having certain things, because of her position relative to him, he is not masculine. He's not a provider. He's not who he thinks he is, and he should be ashamed of it. It's through his mother, who is throughout the show, has very feminine expressions, influencing Oz to the detriment of his own masculinity. This is why Oz gets so angry, because he feels that aggression towards him is an attack on his own masculinity, because he's not stable or comfortable with it. It's insane how complex the gender theory actually gets in the show, because for as terrible as Oz is in his own journey through his life in masculinity, he has some really good advice for Victor, aside from the criminality, obviously. Victor, we know, come this most recent episode, he doesn't have his father anymore, and he looked up to his father. And there are scenes after scenes after scenes where Oz is telling Victor, you have to want more for yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to believe in yourself. And these are the features of like a really strong man, someone who recognizes their place in the world and has the self-esteem to be able to operate in the world successfully. And the reason why I'm so enamored with all this is that this happens in real life. There are people out there who, honest to God, have like really good advice and can present themselves as individuals to be looked up to, and for good reason, and can tell you all the right things, but they themselves cannot enact those things in their real life and in their own life because they're too caught up in the trauma that has been foisted upon them. Like when Oz looks at Victor, I think, and again, the show may validate this, I think he's seeing someone with the potential to be great and seize their lives. Oz is really late in his life, and again, has probably dealt with all of this kind of like trauma from his own mother and probably the death of his siblings and being talked down to by the mob for years and years and years. And in Victor, he sees someone who doesn't have to go through that. And I think it's all subtle and understated, because the problem with Oz isn't just that he's criminal and vicious and underhanded and a liar. The problem with Oz, which I appreciate this story for doing, is that he is not a confident man. And what I mean by that is he's not confident in his identity as a man and what he feels masculinity means. And to dive a little bit deeper into this, and to again put all the student debt that I went into for psychology to good use online, it is because again of his mother, who has a feminine interpretation of what masculinity is supposed to be. And this is what's so dangerous, I think, about expectations of what men are and are not supposed to be. Because sure, you can make the whole like, I don't know, like lib cuck toxic masculinity, roll your eyes and that kind of stuff. And if you want to, go ahead. But I think even if you are the type of person that's not going to take every criticism of gender let's just say, identity and studies seriously, what you can do is just reflect in your own life, like the boxes that people have put you in for the things that you have liked, right? Like I'm a dude, and there's tons of things that I think aren't traditionally masculine that I involve myself in, but that doesn't make me any less of a man. And I think any man who has grown up in modern society can relate to that. And so for Oz specifically, and his mother, his mom believes that her femininity is in part always going to be in relation to his masculinity, because she believes that as a mother, she is supposed to depend on him. And now I'm not saying at all, please do not get me wrong, I'm not saying mothers can't rely on their child, but it is completely different for a mother to basically say that her son is not a real man because he can't support her. I'm gonna be real, I could help my mom. I would do everything I could for my mom, but could I completely financially support my mom right now? Lord, no. I can barely completely financially support myself, but I would not say that makes me less of a man. But it's because of what I think Oz's mom feels men should be, that she puts him in that box. And when Oz doesn't fit into that box, she then goes, oh, what kind of a man can you be if you're not doing this thing? And that's his mom. That's like the closest person that he has to him. And she believes that because it benefits her, or she thinks it benefits her. And that's the danger here, right? It's I think the very subtle, sickening part of modern masculinity, and again, the boxes that it puts us in, and not necessarily in an all bad way, but the idea that, we're kind of confined by expectations, is that it's not just men who create expectations. Women create expectations for how men are supposed to act. And in some cases, those expectations are created in a very reasonable way, right? If women interact with men, they probably think, yeah, I want, X, Y, and Z to happen. But I will be very candid. There's tons of ways that masculinity get transformed by women to negatively impact men, because their expectations of masculinity come from stereotypes about how men are supposed to present. I am not blaming Oz's mom only for Oz turning out the way he is, right? Like, I think that's a bridge too far. Oz is a grown man. He's his own person. He's his own individual. But I do think it would be a bit naive of me not to say that his mother and her feminine view of masculinity, I think it would be naive to say that didn't have a large role to play. And I think that's such a cool thing for the show to engage in, because I think they're showing how unhealthy that type of outlook on your life can be. I think anyone who watches this show should come away from it thinking, or at least questioning, like, why is Oz willing to do so much for power and recognition? Why is he willing to risk his life, the lives of his loved ones, willing to be tortured, and join with the mafia for 10 years? And it's because he wants to be loved, and he wants to feel comfort and love. In the first scene of the show, there is a moment where Oz talks about a guy. I forget the name of the character. If we have a clip, we can show the clip.
When I was a kid, I was a gangster. Real old school type. Rex Calabrese. He was a big deal. If he saw you on the street, he'd call out to you. Ask how you were. Felt like he meant it too. When I'm 14 or something, he has a heart attack and dies. Still holding a cigar. In my neighborhood, they throw a parade in his honor.
But he is kind of like lionized in Oz's mind as being a guy that people looked up to in his neighborhood, that everybody knew. And when he died, people threw a parade for him. And again, that's what Oz wants. Oz just wants to be loved. For men, even today, I think that there is a real lack of emotional depth to a lot of relationships that men can have. It's not all men. I think there are a lot of men who find real vulnerability in the friendships that they have, and therefore cultivate, I think, a really loving relationship with their mothers, with their friends, with their family, whatever it might be. But I'm going to also say it is tons of dudes out there who think they want power, status, women, cars, when really they just want love. They want to be able to be vulnerable and to be safe and to have people that they can count on, and to be self-sufficient and to be confident in themselves. And they seek outside validation in order to gain those things, when really, no matter how much money or fame or wealth or power you have, it's never going to buy you self-esteem. And that, I think, might be the lesson that Oz either learns in the end, if we're going to take an upswing in the story, or fails to learn by the end of the story. And I think that's why Victor is so important, is because Victor is kind of the representation of a person who's innocent and has all the potential to not ruin their lives over an adherence to masculine boxes. And we're going to see whether or not it sticks, or if he goes down the line of corruption. That's one part of what I mean by how femininity in the show and masculinity and gender are talked about almost as a cautionary tale. But the other part of it is actually, and again, this is going to sound strange, in Sophia Falcone. The other thing that I really do want to mention, I know this is already kind of like getting long, but Sophia is one of the just like, I think, best female characters I've seen in a long time. Now I'll say I'm biased. I like characters like Miranda Priestley and Shigo. Give me a strong woman villain any day and I'm going to be head over heels. But the reason I think that Sophia in particular is worthy of commentary is because that for so long, so many people online, and mainly dudes, comment nonstop about either poorly written female characters or female characters that are Mary Sues that do everything correctly, or female characters that are specifically made to be against men, or X, Y, and Z. And there are so few female characters end up being accepted by a large male audience. Now, I will admit, sometimes the criticisms of female characters are correct, but I will also say a lot of the really terrible female characters out there are written by men. That doesn't make them any less terrible, but a lot of the time it's men who don't really understand women are writing female characters that then obviously aren't received well. And then the female characters that are written by women are oftentimes written for women. So femininity becomes a part of the female identity, and it becomes a part of the storyline too. And when I say femininity, I mean how a woman's gender identity affects her socialization, her romance, her job opportunities, that kind of stuff, right? Now, there are some stories that's not really an issue, right? I think something that, like, literally just off the top of my head might be like, I don't know, The Quiet Place 2. Or I think like it's kind of like a gender movie, right? Emily Blunt, I think her being a woman doesn't really bear much on the plot. For the most part, a lot of women characters are either written by men poorly, or they're written by women for women, and therefore men don't really relate to them. And what happens a lot of the time is that men all across the internet will say, we want a female character who's a strong female character, but who isn't a Mary Sue, or who's just a good character. We don't want someone preaching at us. We don't want someone who's supposed to be allegorical for some like greater form of struggle. We just want a good female character, or even just a good character who happens to be female. And I think a part of this is, I think, baked in a little bit of naivete, because if you're ever going to write a female character, I think on some fundamental level, their femininity has to have some part to play in their identity. Because if a person is a woman, then if you're going to write a genuine character, the femininity has to come in somewhere, right? I think the real thing that I mean to talk about with Sophia is that she seems to be written explicitly for those men. Sophia is an attractive, intelligent, complicated woman, but she's not the most attractive woman in the world. She's not the most intelligent person in the show. She's not, well, maybe she is the most complex, but she is a character not made at the extremes, but made with the exaggeration that I think is required of a good fictional character. And I believe her femininity plays a part in her character, but her storyline is not defined by it, right? Like if we really go back and look at Sophia's story about how her dad wanted her to rule over the Falcone crime family, how she was put into Arkham, how she lost her brother and lost her sanity, and how she wants revenge. I don't necessarily think any of that has to do as an explicit exploration of her femininity and her gender. And that's really, really cool. Because again, oftentimes minorities or women or any underrepresented group end up having the struggles that they deal with on kind of like a systemic level or societal level eat up their entire stories. There will be women characters whose like literal entire story is like my pregnancy. You know, I can't get a job because of sexual harassment or something like that. You know, and again, I think those stories are valid in a way, but Sophia is just a character. And she seems to be, whether purposely written or not, what everybody has been asking for a female character, because she's undoubtedly feminine. She dresses like you would expect someone who identifies as a woman to dress. She doesn't behave like a man who just happens to be written as a woman. She is a woman, but her gender, I don't think, takes up the entire screen. I think that's really cool, because a lot of times what happens is that there becomes this dichotomy in fiction where men, especially if they're written as morally complex or gray, men who are villains are the physical powerhouses, you know, and they're completely dastardly and unrepentant. And then the women are written as kind of like the femme fatales who kind of just fell into the wrong way, and who are sleek and sexy and don't really get their own hands dirty, and who kind of, you know, order things to be done while the henchmen take care of everything. And if they just saw some good man, they could be turned from their wicked ways and brought into the light. Our main characters are not that at all. It's really refreshing. Oz is not this like big, I mean, Oz is kind of intimidating because, you know, he's just a bigger guy, but he's not like Thanos. He's not the stereotypical powerhouse. Sophia isn't the stereotypical femme fatale. She gets her hands dirty. She's the one who kills people a lot of the times. And she has her pitfalls. She has her drawbacks. And I think all of that, this is a long roundabout way of saying, I really enjoy the idea of, again, her being a woman and her being confidently and proudly a woman and being self-assured in her own identity in contrast to Oz, where Oz does everything because of an insecurity based like in the treatment of his family, and probably again maybe even the death of his brothers, and then his father not being a good man. Sophia does everything because of her family, but it has nothing to do with her expectation of herself. Like she is confident in herself. Everything that she is doing as a woman happens to be because her family just screwed her over. And I think this exploration of, and it's subtle, it's not in your face, it's not preachy, at least from my perspective. I think this exploration of these two characters in this way, of the gender dichotomy that's appearing between them, I think is super interesting. And I think it's something that, again, is written so well you wouldn't even notice it. And it's something that is refreshing to see. Because there are so many, I think, big budget fictions, let's say, that end up really simplifying male and female characters, masculine and feminine characters into stereotypes as the show goes on. And I hope that doesn't happen here, and I don't think it will. The representation of gender with how Oz, it affects everything that he does. And it's a cautionary tale, and we can see the caution happening through Victor, how everything is coded in his masculine identity and in him striving to be comfortable with it, versus Sophia being completely confident in her identity but striving for revenge and being a strong female character without being in your face about it. I think that dichotomy is amazing. So if you stuck around this long just to see me ramble, thank you. But yeah, if you like what you heard, I'm gonna try to do more of these. I'm gonna try to keep up with everything that's going on. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments. Subscribe. Check out my Patreon, my books, my website. Everything will be below. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for sticking around. And let's go watch more Joker. Wait, no. I do need to watch Joker.